Black woman rescues billionaire's daughter from kidnappers. Her past left everyone speechless. Rain slammed down like it had a score to settle. The kind of rain that blurred windshields, soaked through coats, and made even the boldest city lights flicker like they were afraid. And somewhere, on the forgotten edge of Detroit's east side, under a highway overpass that smelled of oil and old fire, a woman darted behind a rusted truck bed, her breath fogging the cold night air. "She's here! I saw her dress!" a voice hissed, not 20 feet from where she crouched. Raina Cole pressed her back to the metal, jaw tight. Her fingers closed around the crowbar she kept in her duffel bag. Her wet braids stuck to her face, but her eyes were sharp, unblinking. She didn't tremble. Not even now. Not after everything. "Don't screw this up again, Drew," said the taller of the two men, pacing just beyond the chain-link fence that separated them from a row of collapsed shipping containers. "She's worth more than your life. Bell made that real clear." Raina's stomach turned. She'd heard enough. Just beyond the heap of aluminum siding and broken furniture, someone whimpered. It was faint, but clear. A child's voice. A girl. That sealed it. Raina didn't wait. She slipped around the back of the truck and moved through the wreckage like a shadow. She had grown up in streets like this, hid in places like this. But this time she wasn't the one being hunted. The whimper came again, followed by a soft cough. And then she saw her. A little white girl, maybe 6 or 7, curled beneath a tarp between 2 overturned crates. She was wearing what looked like a designer dress, now soaked and filthy. Her skin was flushed red with fever, blonde curls plastered to her forehead. Raina knelt beside her, crowbar slipping quietly into the back of her jeans. "Hey," she whispered. "You okay?" The girl blinked slowly, eyes glassy with fever. "Are they gone?" "Not yet," Raina murmured. "But they will be." The girl shivered violently. "I need you to trust me, okay?" "Can you move?" "My head hurts," the girl said, barely audible. Raina didn't hesitate. She scooped her up, light as air, and wrapped the girl in her raincoat, shielding her as best she could. Then she bolted. Behind her, the men shouted. One of them spotted her silhouette darting through the maze of twisted steel and scrap. She heard boots slapping wet concrete. She didn't look back. She ran until she reached the edge of the lot, where her battered bike lay hidden beneath a tarp. She shoved the girl gently into the basket she'd once used to haul scrap, tied the coat tighter around her, then mounted the seat and kicked off with every ounce of strength in her legs. The wheels skidded. Her breath came in sharp bursts. The wind clawed at her face, the rain blinding. But she didn't stop, because Raina knew who the girl was. Millie Davenport, the daughter of Brandon Davenport, CEO of Halcyon Technologies. Worth billions. Missing for 2 days. Every local news station was flashing her picture. Blonde hair. Hazel eyes, pink dress, reward set at $2 million. But Raina didn't run for the money. She ran because no one else was going to save this child tonight. And because once, long ago, no one came for her. 2 miles away, under a collapsed billboard that used to advertise cologne, Raina pulled the bike behind a dumpster and carried Millie into the shelter she'd built from scavenged wood and blue tarps. Inside it was dry, warm from a propane heater she'd salvaged, and surprisingly clean. She laid Millie down on a folded blanket and felt her forehead. Burning! Damn it! She was worse than Raina thought. "Stay with me, kid," Raina said, voice low but urgent. "Don't you go anywhere." She dug into her small stash of supplies. An emergency fever reducer, barely a third left in the bottle. A can of soup, still sealed. She crushed a vitamin tablet between two rocks, mixed it with rainwater, and coaxed the child into drinking it, spoon by spoon. "You're gonna be okay," she whispered, more to herself than to the girl. As the rain eased outside, Raina sat on a crate beside the sleeping child. Her hands trembled for the first time that night. That's when her burner phone buzzed. She hadn't used it in months. One new message. No ID. Just coordinates and 3 words. "We know." "Run!" She froze. Only a handful of people knew her number. Fewer still knew she was alive. And those people, at least the ones who mattered, believed she was dead, disgraced, forgotten. That was the point. Raina Cole had once been one of the brightest agents at the Department of Justice, a prodigy. A threat, until she uncovered the wrong secrets and nearly got herself killed for it. She disappeared after that. Burned every record, changed cities, lived quiet. But now someone was pulling her back into the fire. She turned toward Millie. The girl stirred, mumbling something in her sleep. Raina watched her closely, thinking. This wasn't just a kidnapping. It was something bigger. And if they were sending messages again, it meant they didn't want Millie back. They wanted her dead. To send a message. Raina stood slowly, heart pounding. She had 2 choices. Walk away. Or go all the way in. She looked at the coat still wrapped around Millie's shoulders. The girl's hand clutched the edge like a lifeline. Raina sighed. "Yeah," she muttered to herself. "Thought so." She opened a metal box beneath the crate. Inside were things she hadn't touched in years. A badge, a Glock 26, a USB drive labeled Bell Corp Internal. She stared at them for a long time. Then she took the gun, clipped it to her waistband, and tucked the badge deep into her boot. Her past wasn't gone. It had just been waiting. And this time, it was bringing a child with it. She moved quickly, checking the tarp's seams, securing the door from the inside. She didn't know if they'd come tonight. But they would come. And when they did, they wouldn't find a scared woman hiding in the dark. They'd find Raina Cole. And she'd be ready. The wind outside howled like a warning, rattling the plastic sheeting that made up the walls of Raina's makeshift shelter. Inside, the flickering orange glow of the propane heater danced across the girl's pale, sweat-soaked face. Raina sat beside her, arms crossed, eyes locked on the shadows stretching just beyond the tarp. Millie whimpered in her sleep, twisting under the old army blanket. Raina leaned closer and gently brushed the matted curls from her forehead. The heat radiating off the girl's skin was worse than before. Her fever was climbing. Raina whispered, more to herself than the girl. "You're burning up, baby. We're not going to make it through the night like this." She glanced over at her storage crate. 2 bottles of water, half a can of soup, and no more fever reducer. Her mind kicked into gear, fast and sharp, like it always had under pressure. She needed medicine, real medicine. But leaving Millie here alone, not an option. Her hand hesitated over her duffel, then closed around the pistol inside. She checked the clip, loaded. She never carried it for show, but tonight wasn't about appearance. It was about survival. She zipped up her coat, pulled her hood low, and whispered to the unconscious girl, "I'll be back before the next dream ends. You just hang on." Then she vanished into the night. The streets were slick with rain. Potholes filled like lakes, and streetlights blinked weakly through the fog. Raina kept to the alleys, ducking behind dumpsters and fences, moving like a ghost. She knew this city's underbelly like she knew the lines on her palms. It had raised her, hurt her.
made her disappear. 6 blocks down, on the corner of a half-boarded strip mall, a 24-hour drugstore buzzed under a flickering neon sign. Raina scanned the parking lot, then moved across it fast, slipping through the automatic doors. Inside, the hum of fluorescent lights and the scent of antiseptic hit her hard. She kept her head down, moving through the aisles like she belonged there, like she hadn't just come from a tarp in a junkyard with a gun in her waistband. She found the children's medicine, grabbed 2 fever reducers and a bottle of electrolyte water. As she approached the counter, her stomach clenched. The clerk was watching her. Young, probably in college. His eyes flicked to her mud-streaked boots, the damp hood still dripping rainwater, the bulge under her coat. She placed the items on the counter and pulled out the crumpled bills she'd saved. It wasn't enough. "You're short," the clerk said flatly. Raina's hand moved instinctively to her boot, where the badge was hidden. She almost flashed it out of habit. But no, that life was behind her. Showing it now would only complicate things. Besides, she didn't have time for questions. She reached into her coat and pulled out a thin silver chain with a small charm on the end. A gift from her mother. The last thing she owned that still smelled like home. Her voice was calm. "Pawn it." "Keep it. I need the meds." The clerk stared at the necklace, then at her. His jaw tightened. For a second, she thought he might call security, but instead, he slid the items across the counter and whispered, "Go." Raina grabbed the bag and bolted before anyone could change their mind. Back at the shelter, Millie was shaking uncontrollably. Her cheeks flushed, her lips dry and cracked. Raina dropped to her knees beside her, tore open the bottle, and coaxed her upright. Millie groaned softly but drank. Then another sip, then water. "You're okay," Raina said, over and over, like a prayer she hadn't said in years. Millie's eyes fluttered. She blinked up at her and whispered, Are you an angel?" Raina gave a short breath of laughter. "Not even close." "Angels don't cuss and carry heat." Millie smiled faintly before closing her eyes again. Raina stayed by her side all night, listening to every breath, every cough. Once she heard a car slow outside. Headlights cut across the top wall. She held her breath, gun ready, but the car moved on. At dawn, light filtered through the seams in the tarp, casting long slashes of grey over the floor. Millie stirred again, this time with more strength. Her fever had dropped. Her lips weren't as pale. She looked around groggily, then locked eyes with Raina. "I dreamed you were flying," Millie said, voice raspy. "But we didn't have wings." Raina leaned back on her heels. "That must have been one hell of a dream." "No," Millie said quietly. "It felt real." They sat in silence for a while. The city outside was starting to come to life. Garbage trucks rumbled, sirens in the distance. A dog barking somewhere under the overpass. Then Millie spoke again. "My name is Millie Davenport." Raina nodded. "I know. I have to go home." Raina's chest tightened. She looked at the girl. Clean lines. Polished speech. Even with the fever, Millie didn't belong in a place like this. "Where's home?" Raina asked. "I don't know the streets, but I remember the numbers. 2117 Shoreline View." Raina paused. That address. It wasn't just any house. It was one of the high-profile estates outside the city. Fenced. Gated, guarded. "Your parents must be worried sick," Raina said carefully. Millie nodded. "My daddy's Brandon Davenport. He runs everything." Raina exhaled sharply and stood. Her brain was already moving. That name wasn't just power, it was danger. Because Raina knew that name too well. 10 years ago, she'd led an internal investigation into a money laundering scheme tied to Halcyon Technologies. The trail had gone cold. Disappeared. Buried. But one name had always hovered just out of reach in her files. Brandon Davenport. And now his daughter was here, in her arms. This wasn't random. This was something else. Something calculated. Millie watched her with those sharp little eyes. "You believe me?" Raina crouched again, met her gaze. "Yeah, I do." "Will you take me home?" Raina didn't answer right away. Then she nodded. "I will, but we have to be smart." She glanced toward the folded map pinned to the inside of the tarp wall. The city was big, but not big enough to hide forever. She could already feel the heat rising. Her burner phone buzzed again, and she ignored it. If they were tracking her, she had one advantage. They thought she was alone, but now... She had a reason to fight again. Raina looked back at Millie, who had closed her eyes once more, this time in peace. She moved to the other side of the shelter and opened her duffel. It was time to move. Because bringing Millie back wasn't just about getting a child home. It was about confronting a past that never really let her go. The sky was still a muddy blue when Millie stirred again. She sat up slower this time, her cheeks less flushed, her breathing more even. Raina handed her a bottle of water and a granola bar and watched the girl devour both like she hadn't eaten in days. "You sure you're okay?" Raina asked, crouched across from her, tying the laces on her worn-out boots. Millie nodded between bites. "Better than yesterday." "Good," Raina said, standing. "Because today we move." Millie blinked. "To where?" "Home. Yours." The girl's eyes lit up, then dimmed just as fast. "But the men. They said if I ran, they'd hurt my daddy." Raina's jaw clenched. She crossed the tarp to double-check the seams, her mind racing. "Then we don't go loud," she said. "We go smart." Millie watched her from under the blanket. "You're like a spy or something." Raina gave a half smile. "Used to be. Now I'm just a woman with good instincts and a half-broken bike." She opened a storage crate near the back of the shelter and pulled out a small mirror, a knit beanie, and a pair of scissors. Then she motioned for Millie to come closer. "Time for a little makeover." Millie hesitated. "I like my hair." "We're not cutting it, just hiding it." 20 minutes later, Millie wore one of Raina's old hoodies that came down to her knees, with torn jeans cinched at the waist using a bootlace. Her golden curls were tucked beneath a grey knit cap, and her shoes, two mismatched sneakers, made her walk with a bit of a wobble. "You look like a regular kid," Raina said, pulling the mirror around. "No one will look twice." Millie turned side to side. "I look like a boy." Raina smirked. "Even better. Trust me, nobody's looking for a boy." Millie giggled. "You're really good at this." "I had practice," Raina muttered, then changed the subject. "You still remember the address?" 2117 Shoreline View. Big white gate. Stone mailbox. Raina nodded, then pointed to a crumpled city map spread across the crate top. She ran her finger along a jagged red line she'd drawn earlier that morning. "We're here," she said. "It's about 23 blocks west, give or take." Millie tilted her head. "That far?" "Yeah, but we're not taking main roads, too risky." "We stick to alleys, side streets, places no one pays attention to." As Raina folded the map, her burner phone buzzed again. She checked the screen. Another string of anonymous numbers, this time followed by a single word. "Missing." She didn't show it, but her pulse quickened. Someone was closing in. She turned back to Millie. "We ride for a bit, then walk the rest." The old bike creaked as Raina wheeled it out from behind the crates. The frame groaned under her grip, the chain slipping once as she tested the pedals. Millie climbed into the crate mounted to the back, arms wrapped around her knees. Raina tightened the bungee cords across the side to keep the coat flapped tight around her. "You good?" she asked. Millie gave a small thumbs up. They set off into the early morning fog, weaving through the industrial backlots, past sleeping factories and cracked sidewalks. By the time they reached Midtown, the sun was fully up and the city was stretching awake. People began to appear, workers with coffees, street sweepers and commuters trying to beat traffic. Raina kept her head down, hoodie up, hands steady. They stopped at an abandoned storefront to rest. Raina handed Millie a bottle of water, then sat on a nearby bench, eyeing the cars that passed. Millie looked up at her. "Why are you helping me?" The question came out of nowhere, soft but piercing. Raina leaned back, exhaling. "Because someone should." "No one else did." Raina turned toward her. "Sometimes the world waits too long to do the right thing. I figured maybe I shouldn't." Millie was quiet for a while, then whispered, "I think you're a good person." Raina almost laughed, bitter in her throat. "You don't know me. I know what you did for me." And just like that, the girl disarmed her. Not with tears or drama, but with sincerity. That was harder to fight. They continued their journey on foot after that, cutting across fenced lots and forgotten playgrounds, slowly moving toward shoreline. Raina kept scanning, behind them, above them, watching. Near the 11th block, she spotted something that made her blood run cold. A patrol car, parked at the end of the street, officer standing outside talking to a shopkeeper. It looked casual, too casual. She recognized him. Officer Grant. 10 years ago, he was a rookie cop involved in a corruption scandal Raina herself had uncovered. She testified. He walked free. Now he was standing 20 feet from her. And worse. His eyes flicked in their direction. "Millie?" Raina said under her breath. "Come on, now!" They ducked into the alley, moving faster, but Grant called out behind them. "Hey, you there!" Raina kept walking. "Ma'am?" "Stop right there." She turned slightly, gave him just enough of a look without showing her face fully. "Just heading home," she said evenly. "Early errands." He stepped forward, hand on his belt. "Mind if I ask a few questions? What's in the crate?" Raina's grip tightened. "Laundry." He narrowed his eyes. "You got ID?" "No." "Then I'm gonna need you to stay put." Her heart pounded. For a second she considered pulling her badge, but it would open more problems than it would solve. She took a breath. "Officer, I'm just trying to get my niece home before her mom starts freaking out. She's sick." "I really don't want to make a scene." "Then step out of the alley," Grant said. Raina didn't move, her stance sharpened. Voice low, controlled. "You sure you want to make this your hill to die on?" The way she said it made him pause. That's when Millie coughed, deep and rough. Raina moved to block the sound, but it was too late. Grant frowned. "Wait a second." "That kid." Before he could finish, Raina stepped forward. "You're gonna let me go." He blinked. "Excuse me? You're gonna forget you saw us." "Because you remember me, Grant, and you know what happens when I start digging." His face turned pale. You were dead." Raina leaned closer. "Try again." He stepped back, confused, frightened. Without another word, Raina turned and pushed the bike forward, fast. Behind them, Grant didn't call out again. And as they rounded the next block, Millie whispered, "Who are you?" Raina didn't answer. Not yet. Not until it mattered. The air grew heavier as they crossed into the outer edge of Glen Ridge. It was the kind of neighborhood where the mailboxes had brass nameplates, where the sidewalks were pressure washed and the trees were trimmed like they were auditioning for a catalogue. Raina felt it immediately. The shift. The way her worn hoodie and scuffed boots didn't belong. The way Millie, even in boyish disguise, stood out less than she did. They kept close to the hedges, moving with purpose but not panic. Too slow, and they looked suspicious. Too fast, and they drew attention. Raina had spent her life walking that tightrope. Millie tugged on the sleeve of her coat. "Are we close?" "3 blocks, Raina said, not breaking stride. "You doing okay?" Millie nodded, then hesitated. "What if they're waiting for us?" "They won't be," Raina said quickly, then added, "But if they are, I'll handle it." She didn't say what she was really thinking. That if this was a setup, it wasn't Millie they were trying to catch. They passed a security camera mounted on a light pole. Raina angled her face away, lowering her cap. A sleek black SUV cruised slowly by, windows tinted. Raina's grip on the bike handles tightened, her body tensing like a wire pulled too tight. She scanned the street again. Too quiet. And then a voice behind her. "Well, I'll be damned." Raina froze. She turned. A woman stood near a parked car, hand on the open door, short curly hair. Navy coat, familiar eyes. Lena Foster. It had been 8 years. Back when Raina was still a name in headlines. Back before the trial. Before the fallout. Before the silence. Lena stepped forward, eyes wide. "Raina?" Millie looked between them, confused. Raina kept her tone neutral. "This isn't a good time." Lena blinked. "They said you were gone." "I was. And now you're here, with a child." Millie shrank back a little. "She's sick," Raina said, "and she needs to get home. I don't have time to—" Lena cut her off. "You know there's a bulletin out, right?" "Silver alert. Kidnapping. The whole city's looking for her." "She wasn't kidnapped," Raina snapped. "She escaped." Lena stared at her, then looked down at Millie. "Is that true?" Millie nodded. "She saved me." Raina stepped in front again. "Lena, I need you to forget you saw us." Lena hesitated. "You're asking me to ignore a missing child case, bypass every law I swore to protect, and trust a woman who vanished off the face of the earth." "Yes." There was a pause, long enough for tension to knot itself into something unbearable. Then Lena stepped back. "Keep going," she said quietly. Raina blinked. "You're not going to stop me?" Lena's eyes softened. "I remember who you were, Raina. And if this girl is with you, then I believe she's safer than anywhere else right now. But if you need help, you call me. Don't disappear again." Raina gave her a look that was almost gratitude. "I won't." They moved fast after that, weaving through the last 2 blocks until the road began to incline. Raina slowed the bike, motioning for Millie to walk beside her. "You sure this is it?" she asked. Millie pointed ahead. "There, that gate, with the yellow ribbon." The estate loomed beyond the trees, a 3-story white brick mansion with tall windows and iron balconies. The front lawn rolled out like a velvet carpet, and at the top of the driveway stood a line of men in suits, speaking into earpieces, scanning the street. Raina stopped. This was it. But something felt wrong. She turned to Millie. "Stay behind me." "No matter what," Millie nodded. They approached slowly. Halfway up the driveway, one of the security men spotted them. He spoke into his mic, then stepped forward, hand out. "Hold up there, ma'am. This is private property." Raina kept her voice steady. "The girl is Millie Davenport. She's the daughter of Brandon Davenport. I brought her home." The guard's face shifted, but he didn't lower his hand. "We've had a lot of hoaxes,"
You have ID? No, Raina said, but she does. Millie stepped forward, lifting her cap just slightly. It's me! A voice shouted from the porch. Millie? A woman bolted forward, phone in one hand, heels clicking against the stone. Baby! Oh my God, baby! Millie ran, and the woman dropped to her knees, pulling her into a tight embrace, sobbing into her hair. Raina stepped back, watching from the middle of the driveway, unsure if she should stay. She started to turn. Then came the rumble. A black SUV pulled up behind her. Not the family's. The door opened and a man stepped out. Tall, bald. Too well dressed for security. Raina's heart dropped. Franklin Bell. She knew the face. Former military contractor turned private CEO. Ties to surveillance firms. Rumored blackmail specialist. And the man who'd had her discredited. He walked up casually, hands in his coat. Well, looks like the girl found her way home. Raina didn't move. You must be the Good Samaritan, Bell added. Or should I say, Agent Cole. Raina kept her eyes locked on him. What are you doing here? I could ask you the same, he said, circling slightly. See? I had a feeling this was your work. The trail was too clean, the kid too well hidden. Only someone like you could pull that off. You had her taken. Bell smiled. Let's not get lost in the details. One of the guards had stepped between them now, but Bell waved him off. You're not going to get away with this, Raina said. Oh, but I already have, he said, voice dropping. Unless you plan to make this messy, which you won't, because you care about that girl. And if you fight me now, I'll make sure she disappears again. Forever. Millie's mother, still holding her daughter, looked over and shouted, Who is that man? What's going on? Bell smiled wider, raised his hands like he was calming a crowd. Raina moved fast. One step forward, pulled the badge from her boot. Tossed it across the lawn. It landed near one of the guards, who bent, picked it up, then froze. Justice Department, he muttered. The second guard heard it, then a third. In seconds, earpieces lit up. Calls were made. Bell's smile faltered. Raina stepped closer. Check the badge, and run the name Franklin Bell through Interpol. I'll wait. The suits hesitated. Then moved, and just like that, Bell's power began to crack. Millie's father appeared at the door. Eyes red, voice hoarse. Who is she? He asked. Raina looked straight at him. The woman who saved your daughter, she said, and the one who's about to destroy the man who tried to take her. Bell tried to move. But 3 guards blocked his path. The porch erupted in motion. Millie looked back, wide-eyed. And Raina finally let herself breathe. The porch lights snapped on like floodlights, casting a golden hue over the mansion's pristine front yard. For a moment, everything froze. Franklin Bell stood stiff, his eyes narrowing, calculating. Behind him, the guards whispered urgently into their radios. Millie clung to her mother, who kept asking over and over what was happening, her voice cracking with confusion and fear. Brandon Davenport, the father, descended the stone steps slowly, hands trembling at his sides. His presence carried weight. Raina had studied him before, back when she worked cases that cut too close to powerful names. Now he looked smaller than the legend, human in his helplessness. You, he said to Raina, pausing at the base of the steps. You brought her back? Raina nodded. She ran. I found her. His gaze flicked to Bell, then back to Raina. And he? He orchestrated the entire thing, Raina said. I have recordings, video, audio, even a paper trail. You'll find wire transfers made through shell companies in the Caymans, routed from Bell's firm to two men now sitting in a Detroit holding cell. Bell scoffed behind her. She's bluffing. I never bluff, Rayner said without turning. I investigate. One of the security officers approached Brandon, holding Rayner's badge. Sir, her credentials are real. She's former DOJ, Internal Corruption Unit. Brandon's brow furrowed. Former? She disappeared after a case went sideways, the guard added. But everything checks out. Bell took a step forward. This woman broke into your home. She's a rogue agent, a fugitive. You don't know who she really is. I know enough, Brandon said quietly. She brought my daughter back. Rayner finally turned to face Bell, her voice colder than the wind sweeping through the yard. Let me guess. You wanted leverage. Something to make Davenport fold on the merger. You thought a kidnapping would shake him. But when she got away, you panicked. Bell sneered. You think I'd risk everything on a child? You already did, Rayner replied. And now you're losing. The front door opened again, and more agents poured out. Not security, but federal marshals in plain clothes. One of them, a black woman in a grey suit, approached Rayner directly. Agent Cole, glad you decided to check in. Rayner raised an eyebrow. You were tracking my burner. The woman smirked. Took us long enough. Bell's face fell as two marshals flanked him. You have no proof, he barked. You're just taking her word? We have more than her word, the agent said. We have the girl, we have surveillance, and we have a warrant to search your offices. You don't know who you're messing with, Bell snapped. Rayner stepped in close, her voice a low surgical cut. No, you didn't know who you were messing with. I stopped playing by your rules a long time ago. Bell lunged, just enough to try intimidation, but a marshal grabbed him by the arm, yanking him back and locking cuffs around his wrists. His voice cracked now, no longer in control. This isn't over. For you it is, Rayner muttered. As they hauled him toward the SUV, Millie broke away from her mother and ran to Rayner, wrapping her arms around her waist. Rayner hesitated, then crouched and held her tight. You're safe now, little one, she said softly. Millie whispered. Are you leaving? I don't know, Rayner replied honestly. I wasn't supposed to stay this long. Brandon approached, kneeling beside them. His voice was quieter now, stripped of his usual polish. I remember you, he said to Rayner. You were the one digging around 10 years ago. You tried to bring Halcyon to court. You buried it, she said flatly. I was wrong to do that. Too late for sorry, she said. He nodded slowly. Then let me try something better. He stood and looked at his wife. She nodded, eyes filled with tears. We want you to stay, Brandon said. Not as an agent. Not even as a savior. Just as family. Rayner's breath caught. That's not who I am. You're whoever you choose to be, he said. You saved our daughter. You risked your life. You don't owe us anything, but if you ever want something more than running and hiding, we'll be here. It was the kind of offer she'd never been given. Not after the trial, not after the press, not after the system turned its back. She looked at Millie, who hadn't let go of her hand. Then she looked at the house, warm lights glowing behind glass windows, laughter starting to bubble inside. She looked back at the street, grey, cold, familiar. I need time, she said. Brandon nodded. Time's something we have. As she turned to leave, Lena appeared at the edge of the lawn, her coat pulled tight. She gave Rayner a slow nod of respect. Rayner paused. She still had things to face, truths to uncover, people who owed answers. But for tonight, she had done something right.
Something undeniable. She had taken a child out of hell and brought her back home. And maybe, just maybe, she was finding her way too. The Davenport estate was quiet now, at least on the surface. Outside, the last patrol car had pulled away, and Franklin Bell was in federal custody. But inside, the air was thick with tension. The living room, grand and spotless, had become a temporary command center. Raina stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, watching the shadows of uniformed agents move across polished hardwood floors. Across from her, Brandon and his wife Allison sat close together on the edge of an oversized leather sofa. Their daughter, wrapped in a warm fleece blanket, was asleep in Allison's arms, her fingers curled around the woman's necklace like a lifeline. A federal agent in a dark suit approached Raina with a laptop in hand. "You were right," he said quietly. The file on this drive, Bell kept everything. Transaction records, communications with the kidnappers, even a partial confession audio. Looks like he was planning to leak scandalous data on Davenport's company, make it look like internal corruption. The girl was just a pressure point. Raina took a breath. He was never after ransom. He wanted control. The agent nodded. "Or revenge, and there's more. You might want to hear this." He clicked a few keys. The room fell into silence as the audio played. A voice, calm, clipped, familiar. "Once the girl's out of the way, we move on phase 2. The merger falls apart. Stocks drop. I'll acquire the tech rights at 1/10 of the value. Davenport will never know what hit him." Then the voice of one of the kidnappers, unsure. "And the woman? The one who found her?" A beat of silence. "She won't live long enough to matter." Raina felt the shift in the room. Brandon rose from the couch, fists clenched. They wanted to kill her. "My daughter. For what? Money?" "No," Raina said. "For power." His face twisted with something more than anger. Shame. "I helped build this system," he said bitterly. "I made people like Bell possible. I thought I could outmaneuver the corruption, but I didn't see how deep it ran." Raina's voice stayed steady. "That's the mistake a lot of good men make, thinking they can play a dirty game clean." He looked at her. Really looked. "You tried to warn me once, years ago. I had lawyers silence your report. I thought it was nothing. I told myself I was protecting my family." Raina gave a dry laugh. "Funny how that worked out." "I'm sorry," he said. "That makes 2 of us." In the silence that followed, Allison gently laid Millie down on the couch and stood. She walked over to Raina, eyes full. "You didn't have to do any of this," she said. "You could have walked away. Most people would have." "I almost did," Raina admitted. "But then I looked at her, and I saw someone who deserved more than a world that lets people like Bell win." "You're not just a survivor," Allison said. "You're a fighter." "Maybe," Raina said, "but fighting wears on you, and I'm tired." At that moment, a soft voice interrupted them. "Don't be tired." Millie had woken. Her small voice filled the room, delicate but unwavering. She sat up, blinking through sleep. "You saved me," she said. "That means you have to stay." Raina walked over and knelt beside her. "I saved you because you were worth saving." "But I can't stay forever," Millie frowned. "Why not?" Raina brushed a hand over the girl's curls. "Because there's still a lot out there that needs fixing. And I can't do that from a mansion." "But you don't have to do it alone," Millie said. It landed heavier than expected. Raina stood slowly. Brandon cleared his throat. "Look, I don't know what your plans were after this, but you said something earlier about systems that protect power and punish the wrong people." Raina nodded.
Well, help me change that, he said, from the inside. You think I trust the inside? She asked. No. I don't, he admitted. But I think people will listen to you in ways they'll never listen to me. She tilted her head. You want me to clean up your mess? No, he said. I want to hand you the mop. That actually made her laugh. The first real one in a while. I'll think about it. The conversation was interrupted by a new voice from the entryway. Raina Cole? They all turned. A woman in her 50s stepped into the room, shoulder-length grey-streaked hair, steel in her eyes. Lena. She stepped forward holding a folder. I didn't come empty-handed, she said. Raina arched a brow. I figured you'd show up eventually. Lena handed over the folder. Everything Bell tried to bury about you. The falsified reports, the internal blacklists. The DOJ had its hands in it too. You were silenced. Strategically. Raina flipped through the pages. There it was. Names, dates, signatures. Receipts. Her hand trembled slightly, but she gripped the folder tighter. This isn't just about saving one girl, Lena said. This is about burning the whole rotten structure to the ground. Brandon looked at her. We'll back whatever you decide to do. Publicly. Financially. Legally. Raina looked from him to Lena to Millie, whose eyes hadn't left her once. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she was running. She felt like she was arriving. She exhaled and looked at Lena. Get me a press conference. Tomorrow morning. Lena nodded. You sure? Brandon asked. I've been quiet long enough, Raina said. It's time the world heard the truth. The press conference was held in the marble atrium of the Davenport Foundation headquarters, the same building where Raina once stood outside, years ago, as an outsider with a sealed report in her hands, and no one willing to listen. Now, cameras lined the back wall, reporters elbowed for space, and every major network streamed the event live. The podium stood beneath a massive skylight. Sunlight poured in, almost too perfect, too symbolic. Brandon Davenport stood at the mic first, hands folded, jaw clenched with tension. His voice, when it came, was firm but low. Today is not about business. It's not about profit. It's not even about redemption. It's about accountability. A murmur rippled through the crowd. He looked straight into the cameras. My daughter was taken. Not for ransom, not by chance. She was a target. Because I refused to sell out the company's core technology to a group of private defense contractors led by Franklin Bell. What they couldn't buy, they tried to steal. When they failed, they tried to break us. He stepped aside. And if it weren't for the actions of one woman, they might have succeeded. The room shifted as Raina stepped forward. She wore a black blazer over a fitted grey shirt, her hair pulled back. No makeup. No frills, just presence. The room, already silent, seemed to inhale. She didn't speak from a script. Her eyes scanned the room once before settling on the reporters. You all know my name now? Raina Cole. You've probably Googled me already. Former Department of Justice. Internal Corruption Division. Disgraced. Vanished. All the headlines fit. A few reporters nodded. And most of those headlines were written by people paid to bury the truth. She placed a folder on the podium and flipped it open. This is the original investigation I filed over a decade ago. It detailed financial manipulation, backdoor influence, and illegal surveillance conducted by Bell Corp in partnership with people embedded in federal agencies. She paused. I was ordered to stand down. I refused. Flashes lit the room. And for that I lost everything. My clearance, my career, my name, a beat. But I didn't lose my instinct, and I didn't lose my conscience. And when a little girl ended up in my path, scared, sick, and hunted, I didn't hesitate. Another pause. This one hung longer. They tried to make me invisible. But invisible people see everything. We hear the things you ignore, and when we speak, you'd better listen. Murmurs grew into soft applause. Not from the press, but from the staff watching from the second floor. A janitor, a receptionist. A few interns, all clapping. Not loud, not dramatic, but real. Raina nodded once. I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for reform. Starting today, every document, every name, every file related to this case will be made public, including my own, including the agents who helped bury it. Reporters nearly leapt from their chairs with follow-up questions. She raised a hand. And before you ask, no, I don't want a job. I don't want a TV deal. I don't want a biography. I want systems fixed. I want protections for whistleblowers. I want oversight where there's been darkness. And I want no more missing girls, rich or poor. That silenced them. Behind the crowd, Lena stood by the exit, arms crossed, eyes shining with a mix of pride and disbelief. Alison Davenport stood beside her, holding Millie's hand, who peeked shyly around her mother's coat. One reporter shouted, "What happens to Franklin Bell?" Raina's eyes flicked cold. He faces trial, federal, international. There are warrants now for conspiracy, endangerment of a minor, and attempted murder. Another question rang out. Will others go down with him? Raina leaned into the mic. They already are. After the press conference, Raina stepped outside to a wave of blinding flashes. She kept walking, down the marble steps, past the media trucks, into the early afternoon light. Brandon caught up with her at the curb. You sure you don't want protection? Witness security. Something? Raina shook her head. I've lived in the shadows long enough. Let them come. I'm not scared anymore. Brandon studied her. I meant what I said. You have a place here. At the foundation. You'd be a force. You already have a board of directors. Then we'll clear a seat. Raina smiled faintly. Let me think about it. She turned, but Millie was there. The girl ran to her, arms out, and Raina crouched to meet her. I don't want you to go, Millie whispered. Raina pulled her in tight. I'm not going far, she said softly. Just far enough to keep the next kid safe. Millie looked up at her. Then I want to be like you. Raina's throat caught. She forced a smile. No, kid. Be better than me. Millie grinned. From across the street, a black sedan watched. Tinted windows, engine idling. Lena walked up beside Raina. You see it too? Raina nodded. Bell's allies, maybe. Or someone else with a grudge. You want us to follow it? Raina's voice was low. No. Let them watch. Let them know I'm back. Lena hesitated, then smiled. You're going to burn everything down, aren't you? Raina didn't smile back. No. I'm going to rebuild it. Then she walked away. Not fast, not hiding. Just walking, like a woman who'd carried the weight long enough and finally knew where to put it down. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, legal observers, and even former agents filled the benches. The case against Franklin Bell had become national news. Headlines screamed betrayal, corruption, conspiracy. But no article captured the gravity of what was happening inside that chamber. No camera could quite convey the weight of watching a man once untouchable now seated in a defendant's chair, surrounded by armed federal marshals. Raina stood just outside the doors, dressed simply, no longer hiding, no longer pretending to be smaller than she was. Lena stood beside her, scanning the crowd. They're all here, Lena said. her voice a whisper. Every person who once looked past you, ignored your warnings.
Mocked your report. Raina didn't blink. Let them watch. Inside, the judge called the court to order. Belle's defense attorneys moved like they were still the ones in control, flipping through binders, whispering to each other, straightening their ties. But their client looked different now, deflated, pale. The cracks had deepened, and when the audio files were played, the ones Raina had uncovered, the ones that proved Belle's voice, his plans, no one looked away. It wasn't just the content. It was the tone, cold, calculated. Talking about a child's life like a number in a ledger. Raina watched from the back row. She didn't need to speak today. Her part was done. The files were public, the system had been forced to act, and her silence had finally become a weapon of truth. But there was still one thing left to do. That night, the Davenport estate hosted a private gathering. It wasn't a party. No champagne. No toasts, just warmth, light. Family. Millie sat cross-legged on the living room floor, playing a board game with two kids from the neighborhood her parents had quietly started investing in. Not cameras. Not press releases, just action. Brandon approached Raina, hands in his pockets. She talks about you non-stop, he said. Wants to be a detective. Keeps walking around asking people if they're acting suspicious. Raina chuckled. She's got instincts. He was quiet for a moment. You sure you don't want to stay on? Not just here. I mean in the fight, the foundation, the team. I didn't get into this to be a figurehead, Raina said. I got into this because too many people look away when it gets hard. And now they're looking at you. She paused, then looked out the window. I'll stay connected, but not behind a desk, he nodded. Then what comes next? She turned back to him, eyes steady. Justice, and not the kind that ends in a courtroom. The kind that starts in the streets, in the neighborhoods no one reports on, the kids no one looks for. I've got names, leads, and voices that have been waiting to be heard. I'm not done. From across the room, Millie looked up, as if sensing her. Raina crossed the room, crouched beside her, and smiled. You still want to be a detective? Millie nodded enthusiastically. Then promise me one thing. Anything. When the time comes, you fight smart. You listen more than you speak. And you never let power scare you quiet. Millie nodded again. I promise. As Raina rose to leave, Allison intercepted her at the door. You gave us back more than our daughter, she said. You gave us the truth. Raina hesitated. The truth is only as good as what you do with it. Outside, the air was cool. The press had long gone. The house stood quietly behind her, but not as a monument, as a symbol that even the powerful could change. That even broken systems could be forced to blink. She pulled her phone from her coat and typed out a single message to Lena. Next target's name is Nadia Green. Missing 2 years, CPS case buried, I'm going in. She hit send, then disappeared into the night, and somewhere out there, another story was beginning. One day, maybe you'll hear it. But for now, remember this. Sometimes the people you overlook, the ones dismissed, erased, forgotten, are the same ones who come back and tear the whole thing down. Sometimes justice doesn't wear a robe. It wears scars, rides a rusted bike, and keeps going even when the world says stop. Because justice doesn't ask for permission, it just shows up. And so did she. If this story moved you, if it made you feel something, anger, hope, strength, then share it. Let someone else know they're not alone. Subscribe to our channel. Turn on the notifications, because more stories like this are waiting to be told, and you deserve to hear them.